thanks to everybody for being here almost part of this year, and we've got very deep areas of alignment that we're very passionate about. And Joseph is actually going to start the session off. So if you want to kick it off.
We'd like to speak actually about two topics that we feel are very related, but they are not often connected together yet, although there is a lot of work happening in that field. Let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Jaroslav. I'm originally from the Czech Republic, currently living in Spain. I am a managing director of a UK-based consultancy and also a chief learning officer at ExO. ExO is a global community of about 6,500 people in 130 countries, which myself, Kelly, and Lucy, who's on the call, are members, and I think Kenneth, maybe you as well. And it's built around the work of Salim Ismail, who's the author of Exponential Organizations, and I've been designing and delivering the training programs. And my career has kind of four main themes: technology, innovation, leadership, and sustainability. And I think the intersection of those four fields is very interesting for me. And in short, you can say I help leaders and organizations to deal with disruption and build future resilience. So this is a little bit about myself. Kelly, if you can introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. For those of you who were here yesterday, my name's Kelly, closely with Lucy, who's on this call at the moment. Thanks for being here, Lucy. And we've recently just launched an initiative called Africa ExO, which focuses on the impact innovation space on the continent. And we're very passionate about what is possible. And to Joseph's point, there's a lot that's taking place on the ground. And so we really want to be a part of creating an ecosystem to enable that future. I spend a lot of my time in the circular economy. Recently this year, I was selected to participate in the Circular Economy Pioneer Program with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is still ongoing. And my massive transformative purpose is to accelerate the transition to a meaningful and sustainable future.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kelly. So kind of to give a broader context, what we see when we work with organizations is, I think there are like three major forces. You could call them disruptions, challenges, but also huge opportunities. And that is the sustainability challenge, the technological challenge, and there is also quite some profound things happening on society front. We are more connected than ever, which poses some opportunities, but also some new dangers that we have to grapple with as a society. So I think any organization today, and we are at the beginning of a new decade, has to deal with these three forces and has to have a position towards the sustainability challenge, technological challenge, and changes happening in society. However, today we'll only actually tackle those two. We'll look at the sustainability and technology side. And what we are attempting to do is to bring them together, because actually many times technology is being seen as kind of the bad person on the block, actually contributing to our unsustainability. And that is because, how our industrial civilization has developed over time. Many times technology is being seen as kind of the bad thing. But we actually believe that technology has some surprising opportunities if we apply it in the direction of sustainability. So what we'd like to contribute to is bring those two worlds that are not always connected a little bit more together. Even in companies, usually have technology and innovation on one side, R&D, and then you have sustainability somewhere else, and they are not always working together. And we believe they have to work together. So I will spend a little bit of time on the technology side, the kind of development we are seeing. Then Kelly will speak about a particular approach to sustainability, which is connected in the way our economies are being run, which is called circular economy. And we'll give you some examples where new technologies are already being applied in the circular economy context to actually drive much faster adoption, scalability of sustainable and positive initiatives. And that's kind of what we'd like to cover today. So speaking on the technology, I don't think this comes as a surprise to any of you here. I'm sure you're a very informed audience, but we're at the beginning stages of what the World Economic Forum has coined the fourth industrial revolution. You can find other terms as well: Industry 4.0, second machine age, the age of disruption. There is plenty of them out there. And even though this year has been very difficult with pandemic all over the world, some of these disruptions are actually a little bit deeper, and they are profoundly affecting and shaping our society. However, we actually don't have a good track record in distributing the benefits of the previous industrial revolutions across humanity or across the world. So I think there is definitely some key learnings and key things that we need to address differently going into the fourth industrial revolution. It might seem like we've been around these technologies for some time. Certainly, like all of them are being thrown around a lot, but we're actually still quite early days in terms of the potential that they can bring. Now, here are some of these technologies that make up the fourth industrial revolution. I won't go through them, all of them, because you can read faster than I can speak. But what is interesting about these technologies is that many of them have been around either conceptually or even practically for quite some time now, but only in the recent kind of 5 years or so, they are getting to levels of maturity, user usability, and kind of way of being developed that they are actually starting to have profound effects on our economies, on our organizations, and on pretty much everything that humanity does. Actually, technology has been a major driver of progress all throughout human history. It has brought also challenges with it, but now the technology is representing very interesting opportunities going forward. We call these technologies exponential technologies. This is because they don't develop on a linear, predictable way. They actually develop on doubling patterns on an exponential curve, which has been now coined by several people, several researchers looking into it. You can look up Moore's law or the law of accelerating returns. And what that means is that it's actually quite hard to predict the pace of growth that these technologies have. If you take 30 linear steps, if you now get up from your computer, take a stretch and take 30 steps, you know pretty much where you're going to be 30 steps from now. And you also know really accurately where you're going to be halfway through, right? You're going to be 15 meters in, and it's very easy to predict. And this is how our brains tend to think about technological progress. This is how our brains tend to think about the world around us and how the world changes and the pace of change. And this is because throughout most of our history, Homo sapiens is 200,000 years old approximately. Throughout most of our history, actually our worlds have been linear and the pace of technological change was linear. However, what we are now seeing is, and that is the difference from before, is that the pace of change is exponential. If you take 30 exponential steps, you to get to 1 billion, which is almost 28 times around the circumference of the planet. So it's quite a big difference. But I think the most shocking thing around that is that actually it's very hard to predict where you're going to be along that spectrum because it's counterintuitive. It's not as straightforward as the linear progress. So 15 steps in, you're still only 0.003 of the 1 billion. And actually 97% of progress only happens at the last 5 steps. So this means that it is very hard for us to predict the kind of positive impact technology can have and the potential and the capability that technologies can have and can represent. And as we will speak later, actually sometimes we are trying to address our sustainability challenges with the current level of thinking and current level of technology, which I think is letting us down because we are leaving some potential on the table. This is one picture that for me illustrates this very well. It's a tracking of world's experts in photovoltaic panels, so solar energy, predicting the growth of the numbers of photovoltaic panels around the world in the markets. And the colored lines here are their predictions. So you can see that they were either predicting stagnation, slight growth, or actually even decline in some of the later years. And this has been across a period of 14 years. And the black line is actually what was the reality, right? So as the number of photovoltaic panels was growing exponentially, what has been being predicted was either a stagnation or even a decline by people who are the most astute in what is actually happening in those markets. So it is actually very hard, very counterintuitive, but it is needed if we are to use the potentials that technologies have. Not only though the technologies develop on their own exponentially, but they also converge to create kind of capabilities that we've never had before. This is one example. This is basically the area of flying cars or kind of flying transportation vehicles, which for a long time has been kind of mostly in Blade Runners and other science fiction movies, because for a long time we didn't have the capability to actually construct a flying car that would be feasible. But now, because of these 7 underlying technologies that are here, we have actually the capability, the real capability to build flying cars. Whether we want to build them or not, that's another thing, we will decide it later, but we have the technological capability to be able to do it. And actually there is a lot of investment going into flying car companies. And you can see these technologies, actually, they have not been developed primarily for a flying car. LiDAR was, you know, it's kind of a radar originally coming out of military and others, and then being used in self-driving cars, GPS and accelerometer in mobile phones, 3D printers, all kind of different applications, batteries mostly for solar energy. So a lot of these technologies have been developed for something else, but they converge together to make a flying car possible. So it is the development of technology and then their convergence that actually, if you look on the good side, they represent huge opportunities. So Ray Kurzweil has said that we are about to, or is predicting, he's a very accurate predictor actually. His predictions, I think, are about 87% accurate, which is quite an impressive track record for future predictions that are sometimes 10, 20 years down the line. He said, we are about to experience 20,000 years of technological progress in just a century. So that is kind of going from the transition, you know, we had to agricultural society, from being hunter-gatherers all the way to today, twice in a century, which can be somebody's lifetime. So this is a little bit a quick overview, and of course I could spend much more time on this and happy to answer any questions, but it's a quick overview of technology, how technology is developing, and that carries with it definitely challenges as with any technology, but also huge opportunities that I think can profoundly benefit us when we are tackling some of the sustainability challenges we are now seeing all around the planet. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly to speak to us a little bit about the current economic model that we have and how it can actually be updated so it actually gives a way to be more sustainable in its essence and how we run our economies and our organizations. So Kelly, I'll stop sharing and over to you.
Thanks. I'll just pull up my screen. Sorry. Great. So currently we are we work within a linear economy to most extent, and as for some of you who don't know about the linear economy, I'll just touch on it briefly. But the idea behind the linear economy, it's quite degenerative by design. It's a complete take, make, and waste, consume, dispose model that we've been following for a very long period of time. And we're starting to really see the negative effects of that linear economy in society. And just got some images I'd like to share with you. If you look at in Durban in South Africa, the amount of plastic waste that ends up in the oceans is catastrophic. And it's not just Durban. And the images here are not, it's not just an African problem. It's happening around the world. Plastic pollution is growing exponentially. And it's up to all of us to start thinking about this in a more meaningful way to see how we can actually resolve this going into the future. If we look at the activities that are taking place in Malawi from a deforestation perspective, there's a deep correlation between deforestation and increased floods. And that then obviously has a negative impact on the future of food security on the continent, and the complete livelihood systems that are then attached with these different economic systems that exist. If we look in Nigeria, the urban sprawl that's taking place, and I'm not trying to pick on Nigeria, the urban development is going to take place exponentially. We know that the economic activity and growth opportunities are huge, and there's calls for the population on the continent will potentially double in the near future. And you can imagine what that's going to do from an infrastructure perspective, a construction perspective, and also from a natural capital resource perspective. We need to start reimagining how our cities can exist in a way that won't allow for these images to continue to develop and expand. And if you look at in Ghana, apparently they've got the largest e-site waste in the world. And with technology comes quite a big development on the hardware side of things, and we need to be very conscious about what this looks like and what this means. And in the continent itself, it's not just about plastic waste, it's also around what policies are we putting into place? Geopolitically, how are we dealing with the various natural commodities that we have? And we need to reposition the continent so that we're not just a dumping ground, but we also don't just take, make, and consume and follow that model going into the future. And what's quite nice about the circular economy, it does present us with an alternative. Society, it positions the environment, and it positions the economy into a narrative and a framework that I really think could help us make that transition into the future. But it requires a lot of rethinking and redesign. And quite specifically, we need to start thinking about how do we decouple economic growth from the use of our from the consumption of finite natural resources. And that transition won't happen overnight. We need to think about how we design waste out and pollution out of everything. We need to think about how we keep products and materials in use for as long as possible. And that's really hard because you need to go back to the beginning and you need to really think about how do we allow for a shirt that we're going to make to be in use for as long as possible. And I use the t-shirts as the example because we know that there's a lot of activity that takes place on the continent from a value chain perspective, textiles all the way through to the production of clothes. But we are making the opportunity that we follow on the linear model, it's all around profitabilities and growth and the margins that we keep chasing. And that's not necessarily uplifting and enabling society. And it also has a major negative effect on the environment within which it operates. And it's not sustainable into the future. And what we do need to do is start to help elevate the level of ambition to allow for us to see what are the alternatives. How can we design a shirt that could last for years? And how could a shirt be used once by one person, but then can provide a use function to another consumer in another part of that ecosystem or within that particular community or space? The idea of second-hand items also shouldn't be seen as a charitable, poverty framed opportunity. It really is a way to open up further economic activities and opportunities that would allow for that decoupling of using resources once only and then ending up in various landfills around the world. So I'm going to share with you some examples on the circular economy in Africa. Coding for crayfish, it's quite a beautiful example in how they have developed, using technology, they've created a platform that allows for a community to enable their own local fishing activities and to be more cognizant of the challenge that they're experiencing from a marine diversity perspective and the depletion of fish within that ecosystem. And just to give you a better view of this example, I'm going to play a video for you.
Het lijkt me wel als ik nou Hollywood of dan als je Hollywood is staan. Dat is dus iemand dat is groot.
When news broke that crayfish stocks in trouble, it definitely put a dark cloud over the community.
Small-scale fishers in South Africa, they're in crisis. They're grieving.
It's like someone who have no identity. Being a small-scale fisher, it's a hard life. My grandfather was a fisher and also my father, so I'm a third-generation fisher.
For some kids, there was beautiful cars and the trains. We play with rock lobster. I never thought of my food as a prime export.
Very heavy commercial exploitation in the 50s and 60s. That should pull the population way down.
It's a high-value commodity. High-value commodities attract high levels of illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing.
It is big business among criminal gangs.
They keep fishers in that vicious circle of poverty.
Closing the fishery is not an option.
Yet there's technology available to really try and break out of the cycle. Daar is nou hoop vir die vissers. Daar sou 'n stem vir die vissers want ek het data.
From traceability to market empowerment to really crafting what sustainability looks like.
Never before have you actually been able to trace the fish back to its true origin.
They're simple technologies, but they're integrated and interconnected. Through our lobby, they can feel it I am moving saam. Ek is meer like vicious circle of poverty. It all starts with this West Coast rock lobster pilot. Let's see if we can break cycles which have been entrenched in driving this fishery potentially towards collapse. And we need to do that now.
I love that example. I just think that the intersection of marine diversity, livelihood systems, and technology is beautiful. And this really just demonstrates in 3 minutes what is possible. And I see that this is a future reality for our continent, that we really can bring those 3 intersections together to allow and enable a far more sustainable future that's meaningful and actually allows for whole societies to uplift themselves out of poverty in a way that we haven't been doing at scale. The other examples, I'll just mention their names. Ocean EXO is definitely worth having a look at. Aerobatics, Plant Village, it's an AI-assisted solution that helps farmers through an application understand their farming methods in a way that they can enable greater yields, better biodiversity approaches to what they do. Tech Innov, it's at an early funding stage, but they're going to use solar energy to power water pumps for irrigation, which is powerful. And Hello Tractor, if you don't know about them, you should. It's a beautiful sharing economy example that's located in Nigeria. The farming assets that are owned are also shared with those who don't own those assets, and it enables the smaller farmers to use technology to drive various farming methods. So it's crop rotations, the seed cycles, and so forth, which I think is really great. And they follow a rental scheme, and that means that your smaller farmer doesn't have to live in a poverty cycle forever. They've got access to assets through a rental model. That's a great way to see into the future. And then we've got Kadoti in South Africa. It's also a presenter. I think he spoke yesterday. You definitely should spend some time exploring them. It's really exploding in a massive way, and it's worth exploring further. I'm going to hand it over to Jaroslav to take you through a few other examples.
Perfect, Kelly. So I have a little bit more just to close. So I think Kelly has showed very well how, like, the overall message is that technology can be a surprising, or maybe not so surprising, ally, but definitely a strong ally in terms of addressing sustainability challenges all around the world, but also stimulating economic developments and allow countries to develop capabilities that are unique and that can develop, quite interesting things. What is unique about technology is that a lot of it is becoming democratized. I mean, kind of a free access to internet, I think, will be sometime in the near future. Plus, a lot of devices are becoming very affordable, and it is possible actually for people to access knowledge and know-how and educate themselves. So technology can be a big equalizer if it is used correctly, and I think it can represent huge opportunities. Those were examples of technology in sustainability and circular economy in African continent. I have here a few others, although the first one is still from Uganda. I'll just say one sentence about each one of them, and we'll give you the presentation and the links so you can have a look at that. But Woochee Hive essentially uses sensors to equip smart hives, and they are working to map the bee population and to prevent kind of dying of bees, which is a big global biodiversity problem. They are using modern technology to be able to do that. They are also able to track even individually the bees. They have like little backpacks that you can put on the bees' back. not my bag, but the bee's bag, and they can track all of the different bees and what they are doing. So I think it's it's a startup company at the moment, but huge potential, and again, tapping into AI sensors, Internet of Things, to help with a biodiversity problem. Provenance, a blockchain-based initiative. It's a kind of a digital passport for products.
Yes, I will ask you to conclude so we can have time to take a few questions before 1 p.m. CET for the lunch break.
Sure. Okay, I didn't know that we count in the 30 minutes the questions as well. So let me conclude very quickly. Provenance, it's a passport for products, excess materials exchanges, excess materials between different companies. NATCO develops vegan alternatives to animal-based foods, and some of the other ones you can click and have a look at that. So these are some uses of technologies. There are, though, in the future, maybe even more radical ones. Once 3D printing and nanotechnology works, maybe we don't actually ship anything anywhere. We will just ship information and be able to create everything in our homes. Augmented virtual reality can dematerialize travel and a lot of other ways that we are currently polluting the planet. So let me just finish with an example here. This is from New York, Fifth Avenue. On the left, you have 1900, all horses and one car. 13 years later, all cars, no horses. So a huge transition in how people were transporting themselves happened in only 13 years because of technology and because of a smart business and commercialization strategy. But what is interesting about it environmentally is that in 1900, there was a big concern about what to do with the exponentially growing amount of horse manure on the streets of New York and London and other big cities, because people were getting more affluent, buying more horse carriages, and horses produce manure. So it was a huge environmental problem, but 13 years later, it was not a problem anymore because horses got replaced by something that was not producing horse manure. So I want to leave it with this message that maybe many problems that we currently think could be environmental and other problems can actually be resolved if we do invest into modern technologies and developing them further and applying them to the challenges. As is written here, combination of technology, but also low technology solutions, especially in certain environments, can be very beneficial. And my closing message here is we are still at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. So I would encourage everybody on the call to take an active interest in technologies, in innovation, and in what future can be. So over to you, Rich.